Hello, everyone. This is Muhammad Wasim Khan, an instructor of your course, Human Resource Management. Welcome to Learn with Wasim. In today's lecture, we will talk about one of the most important topics, which is ethics and employee rights and discipline. In this lecture, we will explain what is meant by ethical behavior at work. We will also discuss some factors that shape ethical behavior at work. We will describe four specific ways in which HR management can influence ethical behavior at work. We will discuss employee fair disciplinary practices, and at the end of the lecture, we will discuss at least four important factors in managing dismissals effectively. Before starting the lecture, before moving toward the main topic, I would like to ask you just two questions, and you have to answer me those questions. Uh, is it wrong to use a company credit card for personal purchases? And the second question uh, is a $50,000 gift to a uh, client unacceptable? You have to think about it and give me the answers at the end of the lecture. Let's move toward the main point. And the main point is what is meant by ethical behavior at work. Ethics and fair treatment at work. The following are the points we have to discuss. That is, what is ethics, ethics and the law, ethics, justice, and fair treatment, and we will also talk about ethics, public policy, and employee rights. So, what is ethics? Ethics refers to the principles of conduct governing an individual or a group. Specifically, the standards you use to decide what your conduct should be. Making ethical decisions always require a normative judgment. Normative judgment means that something is good or bad, right or wrong, better or worse. You are wearing a great outfit is a normative statement. Ethical decisions also always involve morality. Morality is society's highest accepted standards of behavior. Moral standards guide behaviors regarding serious matters such as murder, lying, and slander. Authoritative bodies like legislatures can't change what morality means. You can't make something that is immoral, such as murder, legal by passing a law that says it's legal. Violating moral standards often makes one feel ashamed or remorseful. If the decision makes the person feel ashamed or remorseful or requires doing something with serious consequence, such as murder, then chances are it's unethical. Let's talk about the ethics and law. Uh, because legislative bodies can't change what morality means, asking, uh, is what I am doing legal? Won't necessarily reveal if it is ethical. Something may be legal but unethical, or even illegal but ethical. For example, firing a 59-year-old employee with 40 years tenure without cause may be legal, but some would view it as unethical. One executive says that ethics means making decisions that represent what you stand for, not just what the laws are. Okay. Let's talk about the ethics, justice, and fair treatment. Companies that employees view as fair and just also tend to score higher on ethics. One study concluded that to the extent that the survey respondents believed that employees were treated fairly, they reported less unethical behavior in their organization. A company that is just is, among other things, equitable, fair, impartial, and unbiased. With respect to the workplace, experts generally define organizational justice in terms of distributive justice and procedural justice. It also includes the interactional and interpersonal justice. Distributive justice refers to the fairness and the justice of the decision's result, and procedural justice refers to the fairness of the process. Okay, the interactional or interpersonal justice, the manner in which managers conduct their interpersonal dealings with employees. So that is called the interpersonal justice. Okay, in this slide and the slide and in the next slide, we have some questions. If you want to know, the ethical and unethical behaviors in your organization, and if you want to know where your organization stands based on the ethical behaviors, so you can ask these questions from the other employees. Okay, for example, one of the questions is employees are praised for good work in your organization. If it is, then yes. If no, then no. Okay, so you have to ask these type of questions. A question, these 18 questions or certain questions like this. These questions have been taken from the Wall Street Journal Workplace Ethics Quiz. So you can. This is actually a kind of quiz, and you can distribute these type of questions to to the employees working in organization, and you will know that where your organization stands. Now we are going to discuss important factors that shape ethical behavior at work. So these important factors are individual factors, organizational factors, the boss's influence or the pressure of boss, ethics policies and codes, and the organization's culture. So we are going to discuss each of them one by one. Listen to it carefully. The first one is individual factors. Um, because people bring to their jobs their own ideas of what is morally right and wrong, each person must shoulder much of the credit or blame for his or her ethical choices. Some people are just more principled than others. For example, researchers surveyed CEOs to study the CEO's intention to engage in two questionable practices, that is, soliciting a competitor's technological secrets and making illegal payments to foreign officials. The researchers concluded that the CEO's personal predispositions more strongly affected their decisions than did outside pressures or characteristics of the firm. Um, the second one is organizational factor. Organizational factor, we also call it the company's factors, I would say, or the company's pressure. We also saw that outside, pressures or the organization pressures weakens one's ethical um compass. If people did unethical things at work solely for personal gain, it perhaps would be understandable. The scary thing about unethical behavior at work is that it's often not driven by personal interest, as One former the top executive said that I took these actions knowing they were wrong in a misguided attempt to preserve the company, to allow it to withstand what I believed were temporary financial difficulties. Okay, so that is actually these are the organizational or the company's factors. Another is, the third one is the boss's influence, or we can also say the pressure from the boss. Okay, so it's hard to resist even um, subtle pressure, let alone coercion from your boss. According to one report, the level of misconduct at work dropped dramatically when employees said their supervisors exhibit ethical behavior. Examples of how supervisors knowingly or unknowingly lead subordinates astray ethically include like tell staffers to do whatever is necessary to achieve results, overload top managers or top performers to ensure that work gets done. Look the other way when wrongdoing occurs. Take credit for others' work or shift blame or be dishonest. So usually the supervisor say these types of things to their lower level employees, and the employee thinks that maybe these things are legal in our organization because our supervisor or the top managers are telling all of these things to us. Okay, so under the boss's influence or pressure, the ethical behavior may change or shift to unethical behavior of employees. Ethics policies and codes. Um, an ethics policy and code is a good way to signal that the firm is serious about ethics. Sometimes ethics code doesn't or don't work. uh, a number of years ago, the Iran corporation illegally collapsed in part due to some executives' ethical misdeeds. Yet, Enron's ethical principles were prominent on its website. It stated that as a partner in the communities in which we operate, Enron believes it has a responsibility to conduct itself according to certain basic principles. Okay, so beyond the code, some firms are employees to apply a quick ethics test to evaluate whether what they are doing to do fits the company's code of conduct. For example, one of the company we call it a Raytheon Corporation asks employees who face ethical dilemmas to ask: Is the action legal? Is it right? Who will be affected? Does it fit Raytheon's values? How will it feel afterward? How will it look in the newspaper? Will it reflect poorly on the company? Okay, so these are some of actually the ethics policies and codes are very important for any organization, and I think these policies and code must be in line with the basics policies and codes that are provided by the government organizations or the government standard organizations. Um, the last one is the organization's culture, which has a very important effect on the I would say the ethical behavior at work within a particular organization. What is organization culture actually? Organization culture is the characteristic values, the traditions, and the behaviors a company's employees share. Okay, so that is actually organization culture. And how is culture revealed? The culture of an organization is actually revealed by its ceremonial events, by the written rules and spoken commands, the office layout, okay, the office structure, layout, the organizational structure, the dress code of employees in an organization, and the cultural samples and behaviors and the figureheads, okay, and the mentors. So this is actually what organization culture is, and it actually affects the the ethical behavior within that particular organization. Um, let's talk about the manager's role in creating culture. Uh, some of the manager's role are presented to you on the screen. The first one is clarify expectations for values to be followed. Okay, use the signals and symbols to signal the importance of values. That is how important these values are. Provide the physical support for values, okay, or the firm's reward support for the values. Use stories to illustrate values. They have to use different stories of the mentors or the the people who act very positively, in the ethical and they, who work very ethically in that particular organization. So they have to use stories to illustrate the values of that particular organization culture. And organize the rights and ceremonies reinforcing the value is the last one. These are not just the manager's role that these are not the fixed manager's role. You can add some more responsibilities to the manager in creating the culture. Okay, let's talk about describe at least four specific ways in which HR management can influence ethical behavior at work. Okay, the first one is selection. The second one is ethics training. The third one is performance appraisal. The fourth one is reward and disciplinary systems. And the fifth one is managing ethics compliance. Staffing and selection. Uh, as one writer says, uh, the simplest way to tune up an organization, ethically speaking, is to hire more ethical people. Employers can start by creating recruitment materials that emphasize ethics. Similarly, use honesty tests and background checks to screen out undesirables. Uh, ask behavioral questions such as have you ever observed someone stretching the rules at work? What did you do about it? Okay. So uh, let's talk about the formal procedures, the interpersonal treatment, and providing explanation. Applicants tend to view the formal procedure as fair to the extent that it tests job-related criteria and provides an opportunity to demonstrate competence. Applicants expect respect. Interpersonal treatment reflects such things as the propriety of the questions, the politeness of interviewer, and the degree of two-way communication. Applicants see a selection system as as fair to the extent that the employer provides useful feedback about the employees or candidates on performance. Um, training. Training or ethics training you're talking about it. Ethics training involves showing employees how to recognize ethical dilemmas, how to use codes of conduct to resolve problems, and how to use personal activities like disciplinary practices in ethical ways. In addition, the uh, training should emphasize the moral underpinnings of the ethical choice and the company's commitment to integrity and ethics. In For all practical purposes, ethics training is, I would say, very mandatory. Performance appraisal. How do you conduct appraisals is important. To send the signal that fairness is paramount, performance standards should be clear. Employees should understand the basis upon which you are going to appraise them, and the appraisal itself should be objective. Reward and disciplinary systems. Uh, to the extent that behavior is a function of its consequences, the managers need to reward ethical behavior and penalize unethical behavior. Okay, so employees expect the organization to dole out relatively harsh punishment for unethical conduct. If not, it's often the ethical employees who feel punished. And workplace aggression and violence. Taking care that HR actions do not foster perceptions of inequities that translate into dysfunctional behaviors by employees. So, as I said, that if you want to avoid the workplace aggression and violence, so you have to give rewards to those who are working ethically, and you have to punish those who are, whose behavior is unethical. Let's talk about the employee fair disciplinary practices. Managing employee discipline and privacy. Uh, the purpose of discipline is to encourage employees to behave sensibly at work. Discipline is necessary when an employee violates a rule. Uh, we have three important points: fairness in disciplining, bullying and victimization, and what causes unfair uh, behavior. Okay, I will explain all of these three one by one. Uh, let's talk about the fairness in disciplining first. Disciplining employees is often unavoidable, but any such discipline must be rooted in the need to be fair. For most people, the answer to why treat employees fairly is obvious, since most learn early on some version of the golden rule. But there are also concrete reasons to treat employees fairly. The courts will consider the fairness of the disciplinary procedures when reviewing disciplinary decisions. Fairness also relates to a wide range of positive employee outcomes. These include enhanced employee commitment and enhanced satisfaction with the organization and more organizational citizenship behaviors. Those who view the firm's testing program as fair view the company and the job as more attractive. Okay? Uh, Bullying and victimization. Workplace unfairness is often subtle, but can be blatant. Some supervisors are workplace bullies, yelling at or even threatening subordinates. Employers should always prohibit such behavior. Many firms have anti-harassment policies. Okay, uh, one state agency, I will give you an example of one state agency that it is the policy of the department that all employees, customers, contractors, and visitors to the work site are entitled to a positive, respectful, and productive work environment. Not surprisingly, employees of abusive supervisors are more likely to quit their jobs and to report lower job and life satisfaction and higher stress. Mistreatment makes it more likely the employee will also show a higher level of work withdrawal. Okay, they also exhibit more workplace deviance, or for instance, in terms of theft and sabotage. So there are different types of causes that cause the unfair behavior. As I have discussed, the improper codes, policies, and guidelines for ethics within an organization, or the improper or the unethical organizational culture, or working styles, or the top managers rude behavior or abusive behavior. So these are different types or different causes, uh, of unfair behavior. Employee discipline and privacy. So let's talk about the employees' discipline and policy. Privacy. Sorry. The employer wants its discipline process to be both effective and fair. Employers base such a process on three pillars: clear rules and regulations, a system of progressive penalties, and the third one is, an appeals process. So let's talk about rules and regulation. Rules and regulation address issues such as theft, destruction of company property, drinking on the job. I'm talking about alcohol. Okay, and insubordination. Examples include, like, the poor performance is not acceptable. Each employee is expected to perform his or her work properly and efficiently. Alcohol and drugs, like the um, cocaine, etc., have no place at home. The use of either during working hours and reporting for work under the influence of either are both prohibited. Rules inform employees ahead of time what is and is not acceptable behavior. For hiring, tell employees, preferably in writing, what is not permitted. Progressive penalties. A system of progressive penalties. It is actually a second pillar of effective discipline. Penalties typically range from oral warnings to written warnings to suspend from the job to discharge. The severity of penalty usually reflects the type of offense and the number of times it has occurred. Okay. Uh, the next one is the formal disciplinary appeals process. Uh, in addition to the rules and regulations and the progressive penalties, the disciplinary process required an appeals procedure. Okay, like the right of the employee to grieve the decision helps to ensure the supervisors meet out discipline fairly and equitably. Okay. Let's talk about discipline without punishment. Okay, if you want to keep discipline in your organization without punishment, then what will you do in that case? So we have four basic possibilities. The first one is oral reminder, then a formal written reminder, decision making leave, and purge, suspension from fire. uh, Traditional discipline has two potential drawbacks. First one is no one likes to be punished, and the second one is punishment tends to gain short-term compliance, but not the long-term cooperation employers often prefer. Uh, Discipline without punishment aims to avoid these drawbacks. If it does this by gaining employees' acceptance of the rules while reducing the punitive nature of the discipline itself. Uh, the first one is issue an oral reminder. Okay? So the goal is to get the employee to agree to avoid future infractions. Okay. Um, the second one is, you know, write the formal reminder. Uh, a copy of which is placed in the employee's personal file. In addition, hold a second private discussion with the employee again without any threats. Okay. Uh, so you have to give a written reminder, formal written reminder to a person um, who is actually, um, you know, uh, involved in some unethical behaviors or issues. Uh, the third one is decision making leave. Okay, uh, you will have to you know give a paid 1 day decision making leave. If another incident occurs in the next 6 weeks or so, tell the employee to take a 1 day leave with pay and to stay home and consider whether he or she wants to abide by the company rules. When the employee returns to work, he or she meets with you and give you his or her decisions. And the last one is, um, if if no further incidents occur in the next year or so, so purge the 1 day paid suspension from the you know uh, person's file. You have to remove that, okay? Because the person is actually um, working ethically. Now let's talk about managing employee discipline and privacy. So it has the employee privacy and employee monitoring. So let's discuss employee privacy and monitoring briefly. What do employers monitor about, employees? Okay, they have to monitor the email activity, internet use, and the telephone calls. That what actually the employees are doing, during their working hours, and they have to also the employers also are usually also think about the the confidential. I think about the prevention of the confidential um, uh, files leaking. So they don't want to leak the confidential files or information. So that's why usually they monitor the employees. They also monitor whether the employees are using internet for using it positively or negatively. Okay. Um, Also, the telephone calls they sometimes monitor, not always, but they sometimes monitor the telephone calls, and that actually these types of monitoring is actually um, show the employers about the employees' working ability and their ethical or unethical behavior. Employers monitor the employees to improve the productivity. Yes, that is one of the reasons. Protect from computer viruses. Yeah, and detect leaks of confidential information, as I have discussed with you it above, and guard against liability for illegal acts and harassment suits caused by the employee misuse. Um, let's talk about the four important factors in managing dismissals effectively. Um, Dismissal or termination is the most drastic disciplinary step the employer can take. Because of this, it requires special care. There should be sufficient cause for the dismissal, and you should only dismiss someone after taking reasonable steps to rehabilitate the employee. Uh, However, there will undoubtedly be times when dismissal is required, perhaps at once. Uh, The best way to handle a dismissal is to avoid it in the first place. Okay, so we have to avoid it in the first place. Many dismissals start with bad hiring decisions. Yes, and using effective selection practices, including assessment tests, reference and background checks, drug testing, and clearly defined job description can also reduce the need for many um dismissals. Now let's talk about grounds for dismissal. What are actually the grounds for dismissal? Uh, there are four bases for dismissal. The first one is unsatisfactory performance. The second one is the misconduct. Um, you know, the lack of qualification for the job is the third one, and the last one is the change requirements of the job. Okay. Uh, Unsatisfactory performance means persistent failure to perform assigned duties or to meet prescribed job standards. Specific grounds include excessive absenteeism, ठीक है ज़्यादा छुट्टियां करना, tardiness, persistent failure to meet normal job requirements, and an adverse attitude toward the company supervisor or the fellow employees. Misconduct is, deliberate and willful violation of the employer's rule and may include stealing, rude behavior, and insubordination. Um, Sometimes the misconduct is more serious, is when it causes someone else harm. Lack of qualifications for the job is an employee's inability to do the assigned work, although he or she is diligent. If the employee may be trying to do the job, it is reasonable to do what's possible to salvage him or her, perhaps by assigning the person to another job. Okay, and change requirement is the last one. Change requirements of the job refers to an employee's inability to do the job after the employer changed the nature of the job. Again, the employee may be in distress, so it is reasonable to retrain or transfer this person, if possible. Some other issues in dismissal may be insubordination and fairness and security measures. Insubordination is a form of misconduct, and it basically refers to disobedience or rebelliousness. While things like stealing, chronic tardiness, and poor quality work are easily understood grounds for dismissal, insubordination is sometimes harder to translate into words. Okay, some acts are usually clear in subordinate. For example, direct disregard of the boss's authority, or direct disobedience, or refusal to obey the boss's order, particularly in front of others. Deliberate defiance of clearly stated company policies, rules, regulations, and procedures. Public criticism of the job, of the boss, sorry. Uh, you know, so these are some of the, main unethical behaviors, or which comes in the subordination, category. Fairness in dismissal. Dismissal are never pleasant. Okay. However, there are three things to do to make them fair. First one is individual who said that they were given full explanations of why and how termination decisions were made were more likely to perceive their layoffs as fair and indicate that they did not wish to take the past employer to court. The second one is, institute a formal multi-step procedure or warning and a neutral appeal process. And the third one is who actually does the dismissing is important. Employee is, employees in one study whose managers performed them of an impending layoff viewed the dismissal procedure as much fairer than did those told by, say, a human resource manager. Okay. And security measures. Common sense requires using a checklist to ensure that dismissed employees return all keys and company's property and accompanying them out of their offices and out of the building. The employer should disable internet-related passwords and accounts for former employees, plug holes that could allow an ex-employee to gain illegal online access, and have rules for return of company laptops and handhelds. Okay? Yeah, avoiding wrongful discharge suits and termination interview. Let's discuss them. Exit interview or termination interview. Its aim is to elicit information about the. Let's first discuss the avoiding the wrongful discharge suit, and then we will move toward the termination or exit interview. Uh, avoiding wrongful discharge suit first. As noted earlier, wrongful discharge occurs when an employee's dismissal does not comply with the law or with the contractual arrangement stated or implied by the employer. Okay? Avoiding wrongful doing suits require a three-pronged approach. First, create employment policies, including grievance procedures that help make employees feel you treated them fairly. Second, review and refine all employment related policies, procedures, and documents to limit challenges. Have applicants sign the employment application. Make sure it contains a statement that employment is for no fixed term and that the employer can terminate at any time. Okay. And the third one is make sure you clearly communicate job expectations to the employee. Failing to do so triggers many wrongful termination claims. Okay. Um, let's move toward the exec interview. Its aim is actually to elicit information about the job or related matters that might give the employer a better insight into what is wrong or what is right about the company. The assumption is that because the employee is leaving, he or she will be candid. The quality information gained from exit interview is questionable. So these are some of the exit interview questions. Um, you can include some more to these questions as well. Um, how were you recruited? Okay, one of the questions that you can ask from a person who you are going to dismiss. Why did you join the company? Was the job presented correctly and honestly? Were you expectations? Were your expectations met? Was the workplace environment light? What was your supervisor's management style like? And what did you like most or least about the company? Were there any special problem areas? Why did you decide to leave and how was the departure handled? So these are the questions when an employee is leaving. So you have to ask these questions in an exit interview so that you can have as a as a HR manager or as a top manager, you can get some information that will help you to improve your processes or behaviors in future. Okay, that will also help you to improve your organizational culture and values and styles. Okay, um, so I think that's the end of the lecture, and I'll recommend you to please follow my YouTube and channel and Facebook page.
Also, you have to subscribe them. The title or the name of the YouTube and Facebook pages is Learn with Wasim. And if you have any questions regarding any of my lectures, not just this lecture, but any of my lectures, so you can please contact me on my email address, and that is learnwithwasim@gmail.com. Thank you, and bye bye.